So, with that authority now, with him being convinced, with Zarathustra himself being convinced and being able to claim authority from our master, Zarathustra goes on to cast aside his fears, I suggest, and to preach his message as a bringer of a new revelation. But in addition to presenting himself as the bringer of a new revelation, Zarathustra would also begin to serve as an admonition, warning of retribution for evil ways and denouncing beliefs and practices he felt were irreconcilable with the message he preached. He chastised those who did not follow him, or were actively in opposition to him. Many of those denunciations became part of the scriptures, incorporated into the Gothic text, particularly of Yasna 32 verses 8 through 14. So in other words, his denunciation, Zarathustra's denunciation of his opponents immediately follows the passage where Zarathustra is said to have chosen Zarathustra, where our Master is said to have chosen Zarathustra and Zarathustra's followers as the bearer of our Master's message. Among the individuals that Zarathustra promptly goes on to condemn, some of them are legendary, some of them are ancestral, and some of them were contemporaneous. So, among the legendary ones that are condemned, Yima, supposedly for claiming divine status, also condemns any person who makes the just ones subjects of the deceitful ones, pillages the pastures, raises weapons against truthful ones, probably referring to the nomads of Proto-Iranian society. Then there's the condemnation of, to quote, those deceitful lords and ladies who take away livelihood, who distinguish themselves with great deeds such as robbing us of ancestral possessions. So notice the prophet's sarcasm there. Okay. Probably referring to the ruling class of his time. Then he goes on to condemn the Karapan, who choose to follow the Gemara practices. The Kavis who join the Gemara gang, and the Gemara gang itself, whose members are scorned as ravagers of this world. Emboldened, it seems, by his revelations, Zarathustra went so far as to denounce, and we see this in Yasna 32:14. So notice sort of the build-up. He gets chosen by the divinity, then begins his denunciations, and then 32:14. So within the same Yasna, we have the denunciation of what was the what was the central religious ritual of that time. A ritual that we also know archaeologically is a Bronze Age Central Asian one. Okay? The devotional ritual in question involved burning of grasses and of libations. So the grasses would particularly homa, and the libations, the offerings, that is the pressed homa, the parahom. So the burning of these in the ritual fire, often together with offerings of meat and fat from sacrificed animals. Zarathustra's words, they assume their positions, meaning at the seat of the sacrifice, okay? Assisting the deceitful in the act of slaying the animal and assisting the person who burns the durausha, the long-lasting homa. It is possible that denunciations of this sort against the legendary heroes of the community, against the leaders of the community, and against the priests and the ritual itself, was the reason a diverse array of opponents finally united against Zarathustra, compelling the prophet and his small band of followers to flee. After all, Zarathustra, as I said, had now condemned the ruling families, the established priesthood, and notice in the condemnation, we have the condemnation of the priest who performs the sacrifice, and the priest who then performs the burning. And as I mentioned, a condemnation of, shall we say, in some words, the quintessential ancient, legendary Iranian hero Yima. Yima, of course, is more than just Iranian or Proto-Indo-Iranian. Yima goes all the way to being Proto-Indo-European. The Nordic Ymir, probably Romulus and Remus, Yama in the Indian tradition, etc. So very widely known in a mythical figure.
Yima also Jamsheed?
Right? So Yima Kashaita becomes both Jam and also becomes in India Ram. So Rama as well. Okay, so this is and therefore Romulus Remus. I remember it's a twin myth where you have Yima Yimi, Yama Yami, and they all get dismembered, killed in some fashion. Ymir to create the world, Remus to create Rome, Yama chooses to die to tear the path to the underworld, all the rest. So you can see the similarities in the tales. And then, of course, we have Zarathustra's condemnation as well, being added in the Iranian context, okay? So, far from considering Zarathustra as a prophet, the majority of his compatriots must have come to regard him as a zealot, okay? And this is, I suggest, how Zarathustra arrived at the nadir, the lowest point, if you wish to, of his ecclesiastical career. Forced to flee, as is mentioned in Yasna 46:1. Support and safety would come to the Mazda worshippers eventually, as documented in 46:12, 46:14, and 46:16 through 17. It would come first, 46:12, from the respected relatives and descendants of Tura, the son of Freya. 46:14 from Kavi Vistashma, and 46:16 and 17 from Pashaostra, Puvgova, who would come with, in the quotes, the ardent ones, and Jamaspa. Okay? The brothers, Pashaostra and Jamaspa, were two influential and powerful noblemen, we are told, in the service of the Kavi. The sense of Kavi at this point is someone who is, I would suggest, an orator leader. So someone who uses words to be able to gain authority. Okay. So Vistashpa in this case. So Zarathustra and his sect had finally found powerful patrons. So the prophet would advise his followers via Yasna 46:15. So notice the build-up even within the single chapter as the verses go on. Okay, 46:15. His advice to his so probably to his relatives, the spin of a family, and his early followers. He says, "I tell you now, you should discriminate between the just and the unjust." The just meaning the ones who have now chosen to provide support. The ones who have just been mentioned in those previous verses. Okay? The relatives and descendants of Tura, Kavi Vistashpa, Frashostra, who came with ardent ones, Jamaspa, and the others. Okay? Zarathustra also, right there in Yasna 46, just a little later, Yasna 46:19, seeks to assure his new patrons that by following his teachings about Aura Mazda, they would be rewarded not only in the afterlife, but also in due course during their own lifetimes. With this 46:19, verse 19, The person who by truth makes tangible for me, Zarathustra, that which is most worthy in value, he deserves a reward, facilitating better life. And then the prophet tells you what at that time was considered a good reward. 2 fecund cows plus everything else conceivable. So everything plus make sure you get 2 really good cattle, okay? So to sort of give you a real context of how this is occurring. Then Zarathustra does something else. Moving from Yasna 46 to Yasna 48, he goes on to denounce an important rival of Vishtaspa, another chief, a chief named Bendwa. Bendwa was not only a rival of Vishtaspa, but had also angered the prophet by following a rival preacher. So Yasna 49 verses 1 and 2, Zarathustra says, again sarcastically, the great chief, Bendwa, has stuffed himself with my grain. Similarly, Bendwa, similar to Bendwa, is his deceitful preacher who repeatedly beguiles people away from the truth. So now, shall we say, under the safety of Vishtaspa's patronage, perhaps even in the territory, the tribal territory controlled by Vishtaspa, Zarathustra could now denounce rival preachers, rival chiefs who opposed Vishtaspa, and he could also denounce everyone who is not following him. So Yasna 49 verses 1 to 2, he talks about Bendwa and Bendwa's preacher. Verses 49:4, 49:11, etc., he now says, people who serve the Daivas according to the religious tenet of the deceitful ones, they will indeed be guests in the house of deceit, where their souls will come to greet them with rancid food. So notice again in these verses, Zarathustra is raising the specter of reward and punishment. Okay. Reward in the present, and particularly reward and punishment in the afterlife. Now, there is a part of the Yasna referred to as the Yasna Haptanghai, the Yasna of the 7 chapters. And there's long been a debate about whether the Yasna Haptanghai, yes, it is known that the language very closely resembles that of Gathas. The question is this attributable to Zarathustra? Does it come right after Zarathustra's time? At the very least, it comes right afterwards. Humbach and Palani Chapuria have pointed out that the Yasna Haptanghai is most likely based on Zarathustra's own words. And other conclusions are that if they're not, they're coming out of his preachings and being written down immediately afterwards. Adding the Yasna Haptanghai to the understanding of the Gathas, Yasna Haptanghai, so Yasna 35 verses, let's say 2 through 7, you have Zarathustra now being able to openly claim, I am the promulgator of good thoughts, of good words, of good deeds. He promulgates himself as the one who wishes to encourage it, meaning good thoughts, good words, good deeds, in you, and to make it known to the best extent possible. Speaking in the words of the Yasna Haptanghai, Zarathustra goes on to refer to our Master, to say that our Master should be worshipped as the one who, to quote, who created the cow and organ, who created water and good plants, who created the stars and the earth, who created all good things. And Zarathustra could openly preach that Yasna 47:1, the aura is wise through authority and devotion. The notion that the divinity is indeed powerful and that he is indeed glory. Okay? And that he becomes more powerful through the authority that people have and more powerful through the devotion that people give him. Now, the earliest Mazda worshippers among the Proto-Iranians clearly did borrow from the older cultic practices. Thus, Zarathustra himself, as Mary Boyce pointed out, probably served as a Zautar, a water priest, in the older cult, before his own revelations. And so he and his followers did assimilate aspects of the older practices. So the use of fire in the rituals, the veneration of fire, the veneration of earth, the veneration of water, of beneficent animals, of the souls of pious people, and of a host of spiritual beings. For example, Kshatra, or authority, and Almighty, or devotion, all were now drawn into Zoroastrian, into this early Mazda worship, early Zoroastrianism. The Zoroastrian sect that was developing is referred to in Yasna 40 verses 3 to 4 as the blessed, as the extollers and holy word bearers in Yasna 41:5. On this upward spiral, as his authority and number of followers grew, Zarathustra would confidently proclaim through Yasna 33:1 that judgment would occur while alive and after death, both for the deceitful ones and the truthful ones. Eventually, the prophet was completely confident, as recounted in Yasna 33:4. By praying, he says, I can turn disobedience and bad thoughts away, can turn bad acts away. And in 33:6, he would declare himself as the libation offerer, the Zautar, well versed in the truth. Approaching the height of his power, Zarathustra would list those who had rejected and those who had accepted his preaching, directly or through missionaries. So for example, in Yasna 51:12, he refers to an individual, a Kavi named Vaipya. And the context seems to be that Zarathustra had gone to meet this Kavi early on in his career. It would appear that he went to the Kavi during winter, because he says he was greeted with two nasty gifts of hospitality: the doorstep and the cold. But now he could name the guy and denounce him for having done that. Okay? Initially, he just had to suck it up. Okay? That's the difference. Now, the zenith, as opposed to the nari where he had to flee, the zenith of Zarathustra's career appears to be symbolized by a wedding between the nobleman Jamaspa, who we've already talked about. Interestingly, in the Gathas, the nobleman getting married is not mentioned. It's a Pahlavi tradition that tells us it was Jamaspa. But it is very clear who the bride was the prophet's youngest daughter, Puruchista. Okay. Now, among the pastoral people, such a marriage would have ensured the consummation of a powerful alliance. A powerful alliance that was developing between a newly ascended clerical family and an established noble family. The opening of the wedding chapter, which we all know, okay? This, you know where it's recited. Where it's recited, okay. Yasna 53:1. The best quest of Zarathustra found a hearing. The wedding sermon itself is laced with symbolism of good triumphing over evil. Evil is said to sink lower and lower and lower as we see as the chanting continues through Yasna 53:7. And this notion of evil sinking lower and lower and lower in the wedding hymn was pointed out by someone who I wish was able to be here today, and that's Professor Winford, who I believe is not able to be here. Yeah. Finally,
question.
yeah.
You mentioned something about the Choksy, that hymn,
Yeah.
and everybody. What is it?
Oh, it's the wedding hymn.
But it's not what, I think what you're saying is we are not familiar in our ceremony.
You're not familiar enough with the ceremonial aspect of it.
No.
Okay, so this was the hymn that was intended to, and in some cases still is, recited at the time of marriage.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh.
Or should be.
Or should be.
Or should be. Yes. So that sort of, shall we say, right there at the zenith of his career. And then when we look at Yasna 50, for example, we see Zarathustra continuing to reassure his divinity. You know, this is probably towards the end of his career, you know, where mortality is looming. Because he says, I declare myself your invoker, your preacher, O Master, and will remain so for as long as I can. And then when we look at Yasna 54:1, one of the prayers, again, not always recited, the Irema issue, okay? Zarathustra echoes his lasting hope to quote that the zealous come to the support of the men and women of Zarathustra, to the aid of thought, of good thought, in accordance with the religious doctrine that warrants a reward worthy of being chosen. The invigorating reward of truth I seek, that which our Master created. And after that, we know nothing. And I suggest we know nothing because when the Gathas were finally put together, they were arranged in a liturgical fashion. They were arranged so as to start with the beginning of a ritual, the beginning of the Yasna ceremony. And those of you who have been ordained have been through it. Start with the beginning, there's an ending, okay? It's a liturgical arrangement. So when it's arranged liturgically, then the liturgy prevails over the historical or choreal details. Okay? So therefore, we know nothing about the end of Zarathustra's life from the Gathas. Because for liturgical purposes, that is irrelevant. So for that, you have to turn to a later Pahlavi tradition, which records that Zarathustra was supposedly assassinated by a rival cleric at the age of 77. That again fits very well with the Near Eastern pattern. And 77, of course, is playing with numbers. Okay. So what I tried to do today was to say, you know, we have the Yasna as we know it, particularly, and within the Yasna we've embedded the Gathas, and we have embedded the Yasna Okay, that's all there. We know its arrangement. We know its ritual function. But what I'm suggesting is as we look at the verses, we can also tease out aspects of Zarathustra's life. Aspects that some ways fit very well with what one expects of the lives of a prophet. Okay? And it certainly does in some ways match the lives of Near Eastern prophets. It also matches the lives of prophets or religious preachers generally. In other words, one has doubts, one seeks knowledge, one finds revelation, one continues to have doubts, one's doubts are set aside, one runs into opposition as one attempts to preach, one then finds supporters and patrons who propel one's cause, and then if one is particularly astute and capable, you end up being successful. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, what we do know is that what happens to the yasna in terms of the way it's finally compiled together, remember, these are all oral revelations that are eventually written down. Okay? Some can be written down close to the time of the prophet, others can be written down much later. Okay? But when they're written down for particular purposes. Okay? And that's why I mentioned the biblical texts, whether it is Tanakh, whether it is the Gospels, and also mention the Quran. One can add to that, for example, the Jataka stories about Buddha and all the rest. So, but again, when one looks at what I'm suggesting is when we look at this earliest corpus of what we have of Zoroastrian materials, we can see aspects, fragments, if you wish to, of Zarathustra's life. Long before we have the elaborations that are going to occur in the Pahlavi tradition. Now it's possible, and like I said, that the materials we're getting in the Pahlavi tradition were coming from older Gothic and other Avesta traditions, but never survived in the Gathas and the Yasna itself because they had no ritual function. Now, we have a few minutes, so let me tell you something about what we can also glean about Zarathustra's early followers. The Gathas and other sections of the Avesta mention on several occasions those individuals from the nascent community of master worshippers who became the prophet's closest companions or co-disciples. They included Zoroastra, who we have already mentioned, who's described as, to quote, the closest companion. Yasna 28:8, 46:16, 49:8, and others. Kavi Vistashna. Jamaspa. Jamaspa in particular would come to be renowned later on in the Middle Persian, the Pahlavi tradition, where Jamaspa is said to be a seer. Okay? Maidyamangha Spitama, the prophet's cousin. And according again to later tradition, he's mentioned in Yasna 51:19, but later tradition claims he was the prophet's first follower. Zarathushtri Spitama, a son of the prophet. And members of the family of Tura, the son of Phria, which someone already mentioned. Little is known of these individuals, the lives of these individuals from the Gathas. They are mentioned, they're told, we have things like their closest companion, but really, it's only centuries later that we have the tales about these individuals in Middle Persian and Persian. Generations of followers immediately thereafter, so after the first generation and the companions. Particularly notable Zoroastrians from the times just before and after the religion spread. And this spread would have been through Bronze Age Central Asia into Iron Age Iran. These individuals are listed later on in the Frawadin Yasht, Yasht 13, especially lines 96 to 98. The immortal souls, the Frawashis of shall we say, the subsequent immediate generations are praised. Okay? So individuals like Parshat Ghosh, Vovasht, Istav, Sina, the son of Amustat, supposedly an early Zoroastrian missionary who was supposed to have had many disciples. Even later generations of notables of the community are mentioned in the Ardavisuryas, the Aban-Yash, Yash 5. So, scattered in the hymns that were revised and incorporated into Zoroastrianism, we have these augmentations, the names of individuals from the subsequent generations of Zoroastrians. Now, as for the Zoroastrian priesthood as we have it now, those early clerics, these early missionaries, referred to in the Gathas and the other parts of the Avesta, would come to be replaced. They'd be replaced at the latest by the 6th century BCE by the Magi. Or Persian Magu, into Greek Magos, into Latin and English. The word is mentioned in the Gathas once, and it refers to the notion of a gift. I would suggest it's the gift of knowledge that's being referred to, the religious tradition that the Magi came to bear. In the Gathas, it clearly doesn't refer to any priesthood. It's a notion of a gift-like offering. The Magi seem to have adopted Zoroastrianism after the religion spread widely among the folk of Iranians. Semi-historical details about the Magi were chronicled by Herodotus in the 5th century BCE. According to Herodotus, the Magi had originated as the sixth clan of the Medes. They possessed a dislike for insects and reptiles, something we've already we would see later on mentioned and linked with Zarathustra himself. Okay, they believed in the exposure of corpses rather than burial or placing in water to prevent pollution of the earth. And also Herodotus noted that by his time, no Zoroastrian religious ritual could be performed without the presence of a magus. By that time, the Magi even claimed that the prophet Zarathustra had been a founding member, if not the founder, of their group. So what I'd like you to see is how tradition comes to assimilate. Okay? The Magian claim proved to be highly effective. Okay? For by the 4th century, even the Greek philosopher Plato referred to Zarathustra as the magus. And of course, it's through contact with the Magi that classical Greek and Roman authors learned of Zarathustra. For Hellenic scholars, particularly the followers of Pythagoras, Zarathustra became a mystical figure, a sage, and the primordial magician. A word, magic, all the rest coming from Magi. Okay. From the old Persian word magu. And of course, the Magi would eventually be introduced into Christian belief as the wise men from the East journeying with gifts. In a sense, the old priestly hierarchy recognizing a new order. And still, I would suggest an echo of what the word originally meant, gift. Because after all, even in the biblical scene, they are the bearers of gifts. And ultimately, I would say, it is the gift of recognition, the gift of knowledge. Thank you very much. Most of all, please let me thank Arshia here for organizing this and for bringing us all together yet again, and to the Rivettas for always bringing us together. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
I understand that, but
I'll repeat the question.
Arab invasion, the Arabs attempted to ban badmouth the Persian faith by claiming, accusing them to be fire worshippers, while that fire is
Okay, so two questions. One, was Zarathustra a vegetarian? No evidence. The Gathas give us no evidence at all. What Zarathustra makes very clear in the Gathas is that he opposes the way in which the powerful people were treating animals and herders. See this as sort of a clash between the elites, particularly elite nomadic groups, and pastoralists, and the poor settled people. What he objects to, what he says, what he refers to is this harsh killing, the harsh immolation, etc. Remember, animal sacrifice continued in Zoroastrianism. Oh yes, it continued in Zoroastrianism. One of the offerings to the fire is a portion of fat, and had been constantly. Animal sacrifice continued in places like Yazd into the 1960s, was then phased out at the same time that exposure in Dasmas was phased out. So under the Pahlavis, you had that stuff being phased out, and then it continued in India also, and was gradually phased out under pressure from Hindus. So you know, enjoy a good dansak whenever you can. And sorry, there was another question. Oh, and that, okay, the denunciation of fire worship, Atash Parash, okay, actually predates Islam. It was used by groups, for example, by the Armenian Christians. Remember, the Armenians were originally Zoroastrians. And the conversion of Armenia occurred in the 3rd century, attributed to Saint Gregory the Illuminator. The Armenian noble families were not only the Armenian Zoroastrians, the Armenian noble families were politically allied to the Sasanians. And so Shapur II first tried to get the Armenian nobles to reconvert to Zoroastrianism by treaty. When that failed, Sasanian troops tried very hard to force them back. That failed. The Sasanian fear was not just one of these individuals becoming Christians, but Armenia, given its geographical location, was seen by the Sasanians as a backdoor for the Byzantines to attack. And so the fear was that Armenia going Christian meant that exposed northwestern Iran to the Byzantines. While it occasionally did, in reality, the religious fear did manifest itself once the noble families converted to what the Western churches refer to as Monophysite Christianity, what the Armenians refer to as Miaphysite Christianity. But with the support of those nobles, then Christianity spread through Armenia. So if you go even to Yerevan, you go to the old cathedral there, and you go down to the basement levels, you can see the remains of the old fire temple and the platform of the old fire altar, etc. So, but the political fears really did not, because the Western churches came to see Armenians as heretics as well, because of the form of Christianity the Armenians chose. So politically, Armenia would end up being in between. But just so that you know that the condemnation as fire worshippers predates Islam, and of course was picked up by Islam.
Five gathas, so do they represent certain stages of his life?
Sorry?
Since there are 5 gathas,
Yeah.
do they represent each phase of his life?
I couldn't find any clear phase because, like I said, you can find phases, but you have to pull the materials out. The chapters of the gathas are now based on portions of the liturgy, of the ritual. So the ritual that that begins with the pressing of the homa just at dawn, onwards to the final moment where the parahome is then infused back, now in, let's say in Bombay, in Mumbai, back into a well. So that ritual sequence follows the Yasna and then the chapters of the Gatha, and also includes the Yasna Haptan. So that arrangement has changed, yes.
Who are the Lebanon distance and the purification?
Sorry?
Who are the Naba, I'm getting it now. Lebanon distance and the purification?
Yes.
These two are usually recited together, but who are these? What are these people? They are obviously some kind of followers of the...
Yes, so you notice how you have Kavis and Karapans.
Yeah.
And so you have groups that are put together, those who are opponents and those who are followers. And so, the problem is trying to figure out what the words meant at Zarathustra's time, as opposed to what the words mean etymologically. Because you can trace the meaning of a term back to its etymology, to its roots, but the meaning of the original meaning of a word doesn't necessarily mean what it means at the time it's used. Okay, that's the problem. So in its pure sense, for example, the word kavi means someone who recites, but we know that Vishasva, even in the Gothic setting, is not really someone who recites. Okay, whereas, Zarathustra very much should then be a kavi, but he's not a kavi. So, that's the, so yeah, we have these terms of followers and opponents. It's harder to tell what the terms mean.
I had a question. Now, is it true that the current Gathas that we have are only a fragment of the original words of the prophet? That a lot of it was lost probably during Alexander's invasion with the Nazi. And the second question I have is, you mentioned that the Gathas are now scattered throughout the Yasna liturgical.
No, the Gathas are together. The Gathas are together.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been answering your first question, I think I can answer the second one too.
Okay.
So, what we have now, we have the Avesta, which consists of the Yasna. In the Yasna, as you go into the Yasna, you have the Gathas, whereas the Yasna Haptan Haiti. So I would say the Gathas and Yasna Haptan Haiti are the liturgical core of the Gatha, of the Yasna, then you have the rest of the Yasna around it. Then you also have the Yashts, to Mitra, Anahita, all this. Okay? Then you have the Nidenda. Then you have a series of other Avestan texts, for example, the Nirangastan, the Herbatstan, the priestly code, the Nirangastan, the ritual code. You have the Hadoknask, which also talks about what happens to the soul, etc. As far as we can tell, when you look at the arrangement, we have a sense of what has been lost, because we also have the Middle Persian texts that give us in synoptic, in sort of catalog form, what was once part of the entire Avesta. But what appears to be lost, to have been lost, was not Zarathustra's words. What was lost was the additional material that he put in. So think of it, it's almost like when it came time to try to preserve, it was the core that was preserved. And the core was preserved because it had already been transformed into a ritual. Okay? Whereas, because what we do know, and we know this from